Good morning, sunshine. I'm Carrie Pena alongside Brandon Lee, and thank you all so much for being here for our show all about mental strength, mental health, and how we lift ourselves up.
Yeah, this was a show that we talked about the first episode that was born just out of a conversation between you and I. Super passionate about storytelling, but what we wanted to do is kind of take a magnifying glass and really put the focus on behavioral health because we're coming out of a pandemic and behavioral health truly does touch each and every family. Everybody has it in their families, so we thought it would be important to start a show about it.
And we want to focus on inspirational stories and positive stories. We have amazing guests today, but first we want to talk about what's going down. And what's going down right now is just our appreciation to the audience. We have been flooded with so many social media comments and emails and people telling us really personal stories about addiction, recovery. And I want to read, actually Sandra's here with us in our studio audience. It's really fancy that we have a studio audience, by the way. Sandra wrote to me and said, not only have you created buzz in the industry, you have catapulted a whole new outlet promoting positive media.
Because the fact of the matter is, you and I have spent decades in traditional local media, and some of the stories that we're going to be focusing on here would never see the light of day just because of the style that local news is.
Yeah, so the time constraints.
The time constraints. So we're giving voice to so many people who would never have that platform, and the fact that they're reaching out to us shows us that we're going to be their voice. We're going to give them that megaphone to share their stories to help inspire other people.
Yeah, so keep writing to us and sharing all the stories because we read all of the comments.
Yeah. So what is also going down right now, well, let's talk about Kathy Griffin. This news broke just about 2 weeks ago. And the headline said this, and this was her quote, "How can someone become an addict at age 59? And when I read that headline, it's a common thing that so many people out there ask. Yes, you can become an addict at age 59. There was a life traumatic event that Kathy Griffin went through back in 2017. She's a comedian. She made an off-color joke about the current president at that time. And the backlash that she got from that, she was blacklisted from all of Hollywood. Her show tanked in the ratings. She could no longer do stand-up comedy. And when you take that away from someone whose identity is being a comedian, she went into severe depression, had hyperanxiety, and then she was essentially locking herself up in her house. She began drinking and she became addicted to pills. And when I read that, I thought, gosh, we got to talk about this because you can become an addict at any age. It's about the trauma that hits you and that unhealed trauma, and that trauma can happen at any point.
That's pretty brave of her to speak out.
Yeah.
I mean, and what is she saying that she's doing now?
Well, she's on the other side of it now.
That's
so she
good.
did seek help, and now she's able to reflect back by saying, my goodness, like, how did that happen to me? How could this happen to me? And then she talked also about the pandemic and being an entertainer. All those venues were closed. She couldn't even go and do that as well.
And she got kicked off the CNN. She used to do the New Year's Eve show, and she got kicked off that.
You remember when she was really good friends with Anderson Cooper, and then all of a sudden Andy Cohen. And when they started interviewing Anderson and Andy when that 2017 incident went down about her off-color joke, they started to push her away and they distanced themselves from her. So then she truly felt cut off from some of her friends, putting her further into isolation.
Really hard place to be.
Yeah, which is a perfect topic because now we're going to actually talk about trauma and the impact that trauma can have on our life and how that really is the gateway to behavioral health and addiction. We have the best guest for you today. She is a good friend of mine too. She's the clinical director at Sabino Recovery down in Tucson.
Can you talk about what is considered a traumatic life event? We've done a lot of reporting about, and both Brandon and I are very concerned about the long-term impact of COVID and the pandemic. A lot of folks don't identify the fact that they've just gone through a traumatic life event.
Right.
How do you identify that and maybe get ahead of the damage that has been done?
Yeah, Carrie, that's such a beautiful question because when people hear the word trauma, this is what they think of. Death, violence, destruction, war, divorce, right? Those are the things they think of. I had a gentleman come through my office about 1.5 years ago and sat down and said, I got no trauma, I just drink too much. Help me not drink too much. I said, okay, fair enough. I said, but tell me about your child. And he said, well, when I was in the 5th grade, I was moved from private school to public school. I was kind of small and scrawny, and I was horribly bullied, but I don't have any trauma.
Right.
Trauma is so relative to the person. Anything that your body registers as a threat is traumatic. Children at a young age and developmental stage of life that can't connect to their outside world, to their friends, that feels like death in that reptilian brain because we're meant for connection. That's how our species survives, right? So if a child is bullied, they don't belong, they can't connect, They truly believe somewhere deep down inside they're going to die, and they take that narrative with them throughout life, and will find any way possible to medicate that narrative.
And that's why we say, too, never compare traumas.
Yeah.
Right,
Never.
because what
Yep.
may be traumatic to me may not be traumatic to you.
Right, right,
and especially, I myself suffering early childhood trauma, being repeatedly molested, right, from the ages of 7 to 10. But then as an adult surviving 9/11, another traumatic life experience.
Yeah.
But when 9/11 hit, I did not consider that to be a traumatic life experience. Why? Because other people around me had lost their lives.
Yeah.
Families around me had lost loved ones. I was alive. I survived. That couldn't have been traumatic for me. When we have those traumatic life events, I want to talk about the energy that is stored within the body.
Okay.
And that if we do not heal from it, that energy will come out and will surface at some point or the other.
Absolutely. Well, and that goes back to this whole, so your body feels discomfort. It sends a message to the brain that you're unsafe, right?
Right.
Then that frontal lobe goes offline, and then you're just reacting. What's the quickest way I can to, to bring balance back to that nervous system? But that's where that trauma is living. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, has kind of been the wave of therapy for many, many years. What we're realizing is that alone doesn't work. You've got to find ways to release that trauma from your body. Somatic experiencing, EMDR, brain spotting, ART.
That's perfect, because we wanted to
Yeah.
ask you, Sabino is so well respected and nationally and internationally known. What are some of the modalities that you all are seeing that you consider to be the most effective?
So I would say for trauma that gets stored in the body, especially that developmental trauma, somatic experiencing is a beautiful way to release that trauma. EMDR as well, eye movement desensitization, reprocessing, that's a great way to move those traumatic events from that amygdala, that lower brainstem, back up into the frontal lobe to reprocess appropriately. So I'm an equine therapist. I'm a huge fan of equine work.
We have horses coming to
I
the
know.
studio
Yeah.
later today. I have to just
To
throw that
talk
out
about
there.
it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because why? Because they are a
Because
true reflection of
They
what?
are a true reflection. So horses don't operate from their frontal lobe, they operate from their limbic system, their emotional control center. So when an individual walks into that arena, they're just mirroring back to them whatever they're bringing in, but without judgment. If I'm a therapist sitting in front of you and I tell you you're doing something, there's going to be an element of judgment in that. But if a horse is reflecting that back to you, you don't feel judged. It's just an opportunity to look inside and go, okay, where's my energy? Where am I holding on to this? And as you center and ground yourself, you will see those horses respond in a new way. It's one of the most beautiful modalities I've ever been a part of.
It's fascinating, and Carrie knows this. It's a bit personal because in January, I was planning a relapse. I'm just going to put it out there. I was planning a relapse, and it made no sense to me. It made no sense to me because, hey, I have the best work partner around. I've created a new life environment, a new career for myself. I love what I do every day. So why was I? And there was only one thing that had happened that we could pinpoint, and it was my mother, who I have a lot of unhealed trauma with, came torpedoing back into my life. And what my shaman had told me, he goes, and my therapist goes, yes, that unhealed trauma is triggering you into fight or flight, and your body, your inner child is going, get me the heck out of here. She's going to hurt us again.
Yeah. But the beautiful thing about you, Brandon, is you've done some work. Even
Right.
though you were planning that relapse, you didn't take it to that point because you had supports around you, you had the awareness of what was happening in your body.
Right.
People that lack that awareness and are just living on autopilot and constantly busy, that situation would have actually thrown them into a full-blown relapse because they didn't have that awareness.
Right.
So it's about doing the work. It's not about not being triggered. You've got to be able to do that work.
To do the
have
work.
awareness.
And we love having you here, and thank
Yeah.
you again for coming in, driving in today from Tucson
Yeah.
to be here with us. Sabino is so well respected, and not everyone can afford to go. Part of the barrier to people getting healthy when we're talking about mental health is lack of resources and frustration of understanding how to navigate the system.
Yeah.
What is your recommendation?
So I actually spent about 10 years in the public health system before I went to Sabino, and they were making a few strides, right? I mean, they were bringing EMDR into the mix. Unfortunately, in the community mental health system, it's still the large focus on medication. So what I would tell anybody is do your research, do your due diligence. The resources are there. You're going to have to work pretty hard to find them. Yeah. My hope and my wish is that insurance companies will start to come around to understand that some of these experiential modalities, just because they're not evidence-based, are so incredibly effective, and they will start funding some of these different modalities for people because, the reliance on medication, as we know, is not sustainable.
Well, and for insurance companies, wouldn't it save them money in the end? I mean, I'm
You
just
would
going to
think.
throw it out there.
You would think, because
Yes.
we see it, the cyclical pattern of so many addicts who continue to relapse. And I look at them all, and every time I see them in my art studio, I ask them, I said, how many of you are multiple relapsers? Almost 100% of them raise their hand. And I said, how many of you have actually done the work to heal from the trauma? Not just going into treatment and sitting there and just doing 12-step meetings and talk therapy, but actually doing the modalities that, and a lot of them just haven't done it because of the access.
Yeah.
So if there's anything we got to do, it's like teaming up to get
Teaming
insurance
up and getting the
companies
word
and
out there.
educating them.
Trauma informed, focusing on that trauma piece of it is so important. The stigma needs to go.
Yes.
The labeling needs to go. I mean, I know diagnosis is important in some aspects, but that's not the most important piece. It's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. We've got to start focusing on in this industry to really help people get better.
Shara Turner, she's the best when it comes to
This is
talking
why
about
we've
trauma.
been stalking you. This is exactly
up
why.
here from Tucson.
We need you. I can
It's always
find
good
you
to
on
see you,
Facebook.
anyway.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
But it's Shara Turner. She is the clinical director down at Sabino Recovery down in Tucson, a good friend of mine, and just the best when it comes to trauma.
But we want to turn now to our podcast, and I produce a series of a variety of podcasts, and one of them is a podcast called Elephant in the Room. And on this podcast, we profile inspirational people in the world of tech. I want to introduce you now to Sam Bertram. He is the CEO of a company called 1.1. This company is exploding big time. They got $60 million in first round seed funding, and Sam is incredibly humble, and he talked to me about the power of living a purpose-driven life. Listen.
My brother and I have been sort of keenly aware of our mortality our whole lives, and we are just sort of this transient flesh vehicle that moves through life for 60 to 80 years and then we're gone. And we know that we've been afforded a massive number of blessings and resources, and we wanted to make sure that we could take what we have and multiply it into value for people typically who can't generate that same amount of value themselves. So essentially the question we came down to over and over again was, how do we make the greatest difference in the shortest period of time? That was the question. So we looked at nuclear power, we looked at transportation, desalination, education, all these kinds of things. And then we came across the statistic that 1.1 billion people began this millennium malnourished. And that was kind of the galvanizing moment where we thought, when you really sit on that, understand what one individual would suffer through malnourishment, and then multiply that by 3 times the population of the United States, you start to get an order of magnitude at least. So that was really the moment, that was the galvanizing moment where we really knew we have to do something to do with nutritional food. We then found out very quickly that plants are the basis of human nutrition. They're the basis of animal nutrition as well. So once we figured that out, we thought, okay, how do we currently grow plants? And essentially, I'm going through the pitch deck in my head right here. But we grow plants outdoors. And though it's a gift that 7.5 billion people eat every day, 821 million people don't. And 2.2 billion people eat too much of the wrong thing today. So when we figured out that the outdoor farm uses 70% of fresh water, is 70% of freshwater contamination, it is 95% of human land use, it's responsible for a huge amount of toxicity in waterways, all these kinds of things. The outdoor farm was not going to be the place where we were going to make the difference. And so we looked for other ways to produce plants. And we came across the concept of vertical farming. And that was in college. Both of us were still in college, and we saw that there is a massive opportunity here. And the most exciting part is that no one had cracked the code.
What's so impressive about that is that oftentimes it takes people a lifetime to find their life's purpose. Not everybody even finds what out their life purpose is. He found his in college.
Yes, it was one of his dissertations or thesis, and he was onto something. But what was so impressive, and our producer Christina was with me when we were conducting the interview, I mean, just everything that he kept saying was so powerful because you could see how much he cares, and what he cares about transcends money. They're going to make money, lots of it, because they've come up with something incredible.
But that wasn't his sole purpose when going into it.
That was not his purpose.
Yeah.
And I just find people like that so inspirational.
And you know what a good learning point is never chase money. Chase your life's purpose, do good for others. Everything else will will follow suit.
Oh, you're dropping some wisdom today.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
And speaking of inspiration, we have a lady here today, the ambassador of inspiration. She told me it's her title, which I'm like, I need that title. Dr. Brenda Combs, come on in here, lovely lady. So Dr. Combs is the author of From Homeless to Hero, Embracing Second Chances. And I have to say, your friend and someone who believes a lot in you, Sandra, she reached out to us when we started this show and she said, I have the perfect guest, because this segment is called The Story Behind the Story. And boy, do you have a story to share. It wasn't that long ago that you were homeless.
That is correct. Right here in Phoenix. I was homeless for 10 years. I lived underneath the 7th Avenue Bridge right downtown Phoenix. And in that time frame, I was stabbed, raped, burned with cigarettes, hit by a car, overdosed. Of course, tried to commit suicide because people like myself, we didn't believe in ourselves. I didn't think that I was worthy, and I felt like I was literally destined to either die, be in jails and institutions or prison, but never experiencing happiness because I had no hope. But one day my whole life changed while sleeping in an alley right down the street from the 7th Avenue Bridge. I woke up and someone had stolen the shoes off of my feet while I was sleeping in that alley. And as a woman in Phoenix in the summer in 115-degree heat with no shoes on, I have no way of protecting myself or going to the clinic or the shelter or the police. I wouldn't be able to survive. And I literally walked a mile with no shoes on until I made it down to the park where the homeless were gathering. And that was the first time in 10 years that I finally literally fell on my knees and said, okay, I can't.
Surrendered.
I'm done. I am done. And at that point, I had already done 13 different rehabs. So it wasn't the program, it was me. I had finally reached that point of where, okay, that's it. I cannot do this anymore. Can't be homeless. I can't be a drug addict. I've got to either make a change or this is my last day living.
You said you had gone to 13 different treatment facilities to try to get sober and try to be well. What was the traumatic life experience, or what were the traumas that you had suffered that sent you down that path?
I was 5 years old and going to a school, and a little boy ran up to me, called me stupid N-word, and spit in my face. And at that time, I didn't know what the N-word meant. I knew it was nothing positive because he used the word stupid with it. And I ran to my teacher upset. I was embarrassed. I was mortified. There was spit on my face. And I ran up to my teacher, who's supposed to protect me. And I said, Grover just spit in my face and called me, you know, the stupid N-word. And instead of loving me and embracing me, she looked me in the face and she said, Brenda, wipe your face and get in line. And my heart was broken. And from that moment on, I never felt worthy. And so it was easy for me to gravitate towards the drug crowd because they welcome everybody because they're all hurting. You know, we were all suffering the same pain.
We attract
so that was,
what we are.
Exactly, and that was my first trauma.
It's amazing to me, you know, 5 years old, and you remember that crystal clear, even the person, the boy's name. So how did you find your way to where you are now? Because you ended up getting a PhD, correct?
An EDD.
EDD.
But so
I'll just put a whole bunch of letters. And you know, you can add some titles. But incredible nonetheless.
Essentially, the last probation officer that I had, she looked me in the face when I finally turned myself in that day when my shoes were stolen. I was dirty, I smelled bad, I know I looked bad, and I walked into her office to turn myself in. I was done. And she looked me in the face and she said, Brenda Combs, I can't explain it, but there's something different about you. And I'm not gonna sign the warrant. I'm gonna give you one more opportunity to turn your life around because I see something positive in you.
Goosebumps.
Goosebumps.
And she believed in me. And so I went into that 13th program believing, you know, somebody believes in me. And I made it through that program and decided, you know, here I am now, a black woman with no education, with a criminal record, former drug addict, homeless, The odds are not going to be in my favor to recover, and I'm going to have to work harder to get back into society. So I made the decision then, and education was going to be my ticket out.
Sean, I'm like getting teary-eyed right now
your
listening to this story.
is so powerful, and your book is being turned into a movie.
A movie!
That is so amazing, and I understand that the Ari Levin, who now lives in Phoenix, he's from Oprah's own network,
Yes.
is taking your project.
He is directing my movie, Finding My Shoes, which shares my life story of overcoming 10 years of homelessness and addiction to becoming Dr. Brenda Combs. And really what I really want to come out of this is to let people know that no matter what it is that you've been through, no matter what it is, it doesn't have to be as dramatic as mine, but no matter what it is, you already have what it takes to be successful inside of you.
Yes.
But many times you just need someone to say, hey, I believe in you.
Yes.
Hey, I'm supporting you, or giving you the tools and the resources without judgment. And learning how to practice love and forgiveness. Because I had to learn how to love myself first in order to forgive Grover for causing me that trauma. And that's when I felt like my release came, is when I was able to say, it's okay.
You are, I mean...
It's amazing. You're amazing. I mean, I'm going to sit here and let you go preach.
Yeah,
Like, I just want to be like, preach, girl.
So
Just
great.
continue to preach
we
because
can't thank you enough for
because the
for
stigma
coming
is
on.
there. Yeah, the
Yes.
stigma is there.
Yes.
And it's people like you who are courageous enough to write a book and to have a movie about it. Is people like you who are helping to end the stigma. And that is why I tell people, recover out loud. Put a face next to you so that you now give so much hope and so much inspiration to everyone who is watching and willing to listen to your story. And I just want to say personally, thank you.
Well, I appreciate being here because, again, it's an opportunity to let people know that as long as they get up every morning and look themselves in the mirror and say, hey, I believe in myself and my ability to do my best. I'm intelligent and I'm capable of achieving greatness. Make the right choice and do the right thing even when no one is watching. But more importantly is to continue to always practice love and forgiveness, because that's where the healing comes.
Dr. Combs, you need your own show.
Yes.
So thank you so much. We appreciate you very much. And we're going to go now to, you can stay on set with us here as we close out the
stay on
show.
set.
Okay. We're going to do our sunshine story right now, because that's what we're trying to do here on the show, is spread some sunshine. And we always like to end on a positive note.
Yeah.
And you appreciate that, being the ambassador of inspiration.
Yes, ma'am.
Brandon and I had the great fortune of emceeing the red carpet for Scottsdale Arts, and we're big supporters of the arts and fundamentally of what the arts does in the community, in the Phoenix area, across the country, around the world, how art helps heal. And no one knows that better than you. And as we were standing on the red carpet for Scottsdale Arts, Brandon, it was incredible to see this huge turnout.
Yeah.
And they can grow all of their programs, and it was a beautiful thing to see. And Scottsdale Arts is doing an incredible job of spreading that love. And we want to say a special thank you to the families who helped us pay tribute to the late Judd Herberger and Ellie Ziegler, who were huge in this community, and philanthropists and lovers of the arts. So just in memory of those two wonderful souls. And we want to say thanks to all of you for watching and following along with us. Good morning, sunshine. You can follow us on YouTube. You do all that language.
Yeah, you can subscribe. Go into YouTube, hit the subscribe button. You'll notice there's a little bear there. That's the notification every time we upload a new podcast or a new episode. You will get that alert. Also, we have also launched a podcast to this, available on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play, and everywhere else you can download your podcast. Good Morning Sunshine. So if you're out for your morning walk, you're out for your morning jog, or your commute to work, you can actually listen to the show if you can't watch it.
Yes, and if you have stories that you want to send our way, get us on social media, or you can email us. Thank you all so much. And Dr. Combs, you want to say bye to the audience?
Hey, y'all, make the right choice and do the right thing even when no one is watching. Have a blessed day.
Have a blessed day. Take care, everyone.